You know, I'm making videos about moving to and living in Winston-Salem for over 5 years now, over 150 videos. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people that are thinking about moving here, and some common questions come up all the time. It's been over a year since I addressed some of the frequently asked questions about moving here, so I have a fresh batch from this past year that have come up. I hope they're helpful for you if you're thinking about moving here. And if you need help buying or selling real estate, my contact information is on the screen. It's also in the description. In the description as well, you'll see a link to my Google reviews. You'll be in good hands if we decide to work together. But the first question when people are thinking about moving here and they're doing some research and they hear that I moved here in 2019 with just my two sons from the suburbs of Chicago, we didn't know one person when we moved here. The question is, what's it actually like living in Winston-Salem? Do you like it? So for us, it's been great. Just as good or better than I hoped for when we did it. But for some people, you know, I've helped well over 100 people move here, and for some people, you know, it hasn't gone well. One reason or another, they didn't like it, they decided to move back where they came from. The most common things when someone doesn't enjoy living in Winston-Salem that I've run across at least, is the biggest one is they haven't made connections when they got here. I'm grateful that when I talk to clients and do a check-in with them after, you know, they get into the new house and things like that, how are things going? So many of them have said, hey, we found our community in this area, or we found people that we connect with in this area, or things to do in these areas that are just great. And overall, it's really good. But when I see people that miss that mark and they just don't feel that sense of home, oftentimes it's that they're not making connections. They're just kind of staying on their own. They're not getting, you know, maybe outside their comfort zone a little bit to meet new people or to do different things, and they don't make connections. And obviously that's tough to be happy when you feel like you know no one and you relate to no one. So just a little encouragement, if you decide to do it, just be prepared, go outside your comfort zone a little bit, meet and talk to people, get out to some events and different things like that. The other common thing is, you know, something happened with the job, it's relocating, or the remote work didn't happen. You know, that was really common during the pandemic. They're stopping the remote work and that's causing them to have to move. But for the biggest reason was connections, and a really good resource if you're looking for things to do or places to connect in the community is called the Go To Winston-Salem. They have a website and also a good social media presence. They're always talking about events going on in the city, concerts, things to do, new restaurants, new shops, and all that stuff like that. So that's a really great resource to help you make some of those connections. All right, the next question kind of piggybacks right on that. Is the most common one is, will I feel like an outsider here? Will people welcome me? I get this one a lot. You know, I'm from Boston and I have an accent. Are people going to like me or are they going to laugh at me? And you know what? People from here come from all over the country, sometimes outside of the country as well. It seems like about half have come from somewhere else. They're very open. They're very welcoming for the most part. So yes, you will feel connected. So whatever your fill in the blank is I'm from here, or I'm this race or religion or whatever, you know, Winston-Salem has an A+ rating for diversity on niche.com. And I've just found the people here incredibly nice and welcoming. I really don't think that will be an issue. This next one is a good one. It's especially for people that are doing deep research and things like that. I get this one more often than I would have thought, is what surprises people most after they move here? And kind of surprising when I talk to clients and other people that are relocating here, is relocating to somewhere new is not as bad as they thought. Yes, there's going to be some stress in, you know, selling a house in one location and moving to a whole nother part of the country, sometimes even across the country. That's going to be a little bit stressful. We have systems in place to really help minimize those things. People tell me all the time the actual part of being somewhere new is a little bit easier. Whether it's, you know, they found a church that they plugged into, or they got their kids into some school activities and met people like that. They make those connections we just talked about, but also the biggest thing is the everyday things tend to be just a little bit simpler here. It's so appealing. I don't think a lot of people notice that until they get here and just see what I'm talking about. If you have to call into the city or talk to someone in the building, like you can actually reach someone or they'll return the call. It's just those little simple things like that. Now the DMV can still be a mess, but finding those simple things, or just the everyday simple things of, you know, commuting to work or picking up the kids from school, like just those things just tend to be so much simpler here. It's just probably a little bit smaller from where a lot of people come from if it's from another city. And like I said, just a little bit more relaxed pace of life just tends to make the everyday things a lot simpler. And I think that's surprising to a lot of people. Next one I get really often is, okay, is the summer heat as bad as they say it is? And yes, we're in the South, so it does get hot here in the summer. Now, it's not, you know, Texas or Arizona or Florida hot, but it does get hot. Personally, I don't think it's as bad as I was expecting when we first visited here. Most of the time in the summer, the temperatures are in, you know, high 80s and low 90s. And by the time September comes, I'm ready for summer to be over. That's for sure. It does carry on for a while, but it is overall not as bad as I thought it was. Since I've lived here 6 years, we've had less than a handful of days in the 100-degree mark. Now, granted, 80s and 90s are still hot, especially when you add in some humidity, but not as bad as I thought. Many nights cool off to a reasonable temperature, and I'm still doing a bonfire in the backyard well into June. Sometimes it cools off at night just to where that's still comfortable enough. But one thing I will say, especially if you're coming from somewhere north of here, is the sun is more intense down here, so it can get hotter quicker. So if you're going to go out on those morning walks, you should get out there early and do that, because by about 10 or 10:30, you're really starting to feel the heat in the summertime, and I mean that literally. But there are 4 weeks where I tell people, just a rule of thumb, where that tends to be the worst. So it's not drawn out all over the summer, but the last 2 weeks of July and the first 2 weeks of August, they're pretty hot. It can be a little bit uncomfortable. People tend to spend a little bit more time indoors during that time. But overall, not quite as bad as I thought. That is a nice trade-off versus having, the winter I came from in Chicago. Next question is, people are doing more research when they're thinking about moving here and they're really kind of getting ready to pull the trigger. It is, what's the market like? Do I need to move fast when I find a house that I like? And this is an interesting question, because the real estate market here, like a lot of places, is seasonal. In the wintertime, that kind of November through February, it's a little bit slower. But the typical answer to that is, yes, you should be prepared to move a little bit quicker when you find a house that you really like. And there are a couple different reasons for that. One, the area is growing just a little bit. So more people are coming here than are moving. So there is a supply strain on houses a little bit. We have seen that improve over the last year or two, much better than it was. But a great home in a great area at a great price does go quickly. But at the same time, with rates and prices where they are, buyers are a little bit more wary. Interesting stat for you: the average home right now, as I'm recording this in summer 2025, it takes 8 or 9 showings to get a house under contract. But the average house is only getting about 5 showings scheduled. So there's a gap in there. So that means that there are a chunk of houses that people just aren't going to see, whether it's overpriced and poor condition or something like that. But our average days on market are still relatively low. So there is demand, especially on the right house at the right price in the right location. So overall, typically, yes, you should be prepared to move a little quickly if you see a house that you like. Next question I get is, okay, we're moving here. What area should I move to? Where should I be looking? And as you get closer to doing this, I always tell people, let's book a Zoom meeting or a phone call at least, where we can really go over this in more detail. But to be brief, to give you some guidelines, here's my suggestion. Winston-Salem and the surrounding suburbs, Clemens, Louisville, Kernersville, and things like that, because our population density is lower here than a lot of other cities, it does cover a larger geographical area. Simpler way to say all that, I guess, would be is it's a little bit more spread out versus densely packed urban city centers. So what I suggest to do is first narrow it down by the type of house do you want. Do you need an old historic home with a lot of character? That's going to narrow it down. Or would you rather be in more of a family-oriented suburb, or a place where a lot of retired people tend to go to, or a mix of all the above, right? And specifically, what is the type of house in there? Do I need something, newer than 2000? Or like I said, the older ones with a lot of historic character? Or am I open to, the 70s ranchers where they have just one level living? Think of the type of house you want, and then that will help kind of narrow that down a little bit. And then cross-reference that with your biggest lifestyle needs. Do you have to be in a certain school district? Or do you want to be a certain shopping or restaurants or the school of the arts? And then mix in your wants in there, right? Like, what do you want to be? I want to be in the suburbs, or I want to be in the city, or I want to be in a place that tends to have lower crime rates. And what you'll see is that large geographic areas starts to shrink down. And again, we're going to go over this if we work together in a lot greater detail, but that's how I would suggest getting started on where you want to live. My criteria, for instance, was very specific. So I wanted to have a highly rated school district for my kids. I wanted to have easy access to downtown with restaurants and things like that. Also wanted to be 10 to 15 minutes from Trader Joe's and Costco. So that really helped me kind of narrow those things down. I was open to the type of house, but those lifestyle things are really what drove it for me, and will help you come up with the same criteria and really help narrow that down. Next question that comes up is, I see Winston-Salem is rated high in crime. It's higher than the national average. What's going on with these crime statistics? And this one, people are trying to get me thrown in real estate jail for telling them live here, don't live here. I can't do that. I will tell you this, Winston-Salem is a city, and just like any other city, there are parts of the city that are going to have higher crime and parts that are going to have lower crime. The good news is the city publishes quarterly reports on this, and year over year, all crime, property crime, violent crime, everything has come down by quite a bit. So that's really good news over the last year or two, but it still is a little bit higher than the national average. So you can go on, you can get those reports from the city, or you can go on crimemapping.com or neighborhoodscout.com, and you can kind of see areas where there tends to be more or less crime and kind of help that with your search. But also on those, you'll start to see what is the type of crime that goes on. And if there's a silver lining to all this, the crime in Winston-Salem tends to be petty property crime type things, someone rifling through a car, or something like that, or kids, acting up and doing things like that. The violent crime has come way, way down. The city feels really safe. I feel safe when, me or my kids, we would go downtown or out somewhere. It doesn't feel like that. But it is worth knowing that, some areas are going to have higher crime than others. So it is something that you should do a little bit more research on. I'm happy to talk you through some of that and give you some additional resources if you need. Next one I see when people are looking at houses here and they ask me, I see a lot of HOAs in the Winston-Salem area. I don't like HOAs. They're too intrusive. What's going on with that? Are they super strict? Now, there are going to be some, yes, that are, and we can talk through some of those where the people tend to be a little bit nosy with their clipboards out and things like that. But the vast majority of HOAs that you're going to see are just set for simple neighborhood standards. It's a really low amount. They tend to be annual payments of a few $100s, and it's just really set up to help the neighborhood maintain like common areas, whether it's mailbox kiosks or common area maintenance or street lights and things like that. Many of them are very unobtrusive and not something that you really need to give too much thought about. Of course, it's important to review any of the rules or deed restrictions that might be in a neighborhood, but overall, I found them to be way, way less intrusive than when I moved in Illinois. And if avoiding HOAs is something that you just want to do altogether, we can absolutely do that. We can filter that out right in the MLS for our search, so that will be simple too. And if you're thinking about buying or selling real estate in Winston-Salem or anywhere around the surrounding area, I'd love to be a resource for you. You can reach out to me directly at jeff@govalentino.com. Thanks.